Got the music ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. It's Sunday, but not just any Sunday. It's the Sunday where we admit that we have officially survived 1 week of the new administration. And with that, we have so much to talk about. Let's just jump into a rotation. Now, I almost just made one of the cardinal sins of journalism and used the expression needless to say. Because you can't use that to say, because when you're saying needless to say, you've already said it what you're going to say. So if it was needless to say, you can't say it. So any good editor would look at that and say, you're fired. Speaking of editors, we have a fantastic guest right now who happened to be an editor at one point in time. In fact, editor of one of my favorite magazines, High Times, where I got my first coupon for growing mushrooms back in God knows when. And a fantastic photographer, and has a lot to talk about in regards to one of his main subjects, which was a subject of an actual pardon, not from this administration, but the previous administration, who should have been pardoned from the administration before that, and administration before that, and administration before that, and administration before that. And first off, let me introduce myself. My name is Gary Stein. I'm the political director for Suncoast Normal, and our master of public health. Where's my sound effect?
Can you hear the topic now? Is that
I did not? Yeah, I hear it now. Yeah, but
there's something going on with like background noise and like.
Well, the echo's.
What happened?
No, the echo's gone.
The echo's gone. I didn't hear the echo, but like if I turn off the background noise, if I turn on reduced background noise, I can't hit that. You guys heard that, right?
Yes, and right below me is our deputy director and engineer, and I think a graduate of the Specs Howard School of Broadcasting in Washington, D.C., Carlos Angel Ermida.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
One of the Cubans who is not coming here to seek asylum, which is good because he just got the new guy just got rid of that. But we're going to get into that in a minute too. And to my right, your left, I think, coming to us from the Beltway, where he hits him above the below the Beltway, the place where hell froze over this week. Chris Cano. Chris, how are things in DC right now? Are they still a little slippery?
I think the proper word in English language is shit show. Yep, that's what it is. So
I mean, seriously. I lived in D.C. and they have a lot of elevated expressways over there, especially around the southeast area there. And you can't go on those expressways when it's freezing and it's 5 inches of snow because you will slide down that hill into the car that's in front of you.
Well, the roads are getting salted regularly here, and so are the politicians. They're salty little bitches.
Yeah, and we're all getting assaulted, essentially.
And we'll talk about all the updates from DC in the news later in the program
in just a minute. But I'm just happy to have Malcom back. Malcom is one of our fan favorites. He's been out here for a couple of times right now, and he served as one of these editors in chief of High Times magazine, as I said, and a photographer who one of his main subjects for many years has been a gentleman by the name of Leonard Peltier. Now, I remember back in 1975 when he was arrested during that whole debacle. And he was part of an organization called AIM, American Indian Movement, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
American. And that was right after J. Edgar Hoover had left the FBI. There was a new FBI taking over. I think it was trying to maintain the legacy, but trying to change things. And we had among other things, we had the Wounded Knee situation going on in South Dakota, and Leonard got caught in that, and he got convicted of a crime that he essentially did not commit. I'll let you take over from here, Malcom.
Yeah, when you talk about the FBI in 1973, the AIM, the American Indian Movement, staged a demonstration. They wanted to bring attention to the fact that how many treaties have been ignored in the United States. And so their choice was to go to Wounded Knee, which of course is the site of the terrible massacre in 1890 when about 250 to 300 Indians were mowed down by Hotchkiss guns and the U.S. Army. So they wanted to make a statement there. And what it resulted was a 71-day standoff where the United States brought in all kinds of forces to try to stop the Indians. But there was a standoff. Eventually it ended peacefully. All of the Indians were acquitted. But from that point on, there was a huge FBI presence on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And that culminated in 1975 in June, when Leonard and a group of about 14 or 15 people who were camping on the property of a Native American, the Jumping Bull Ranch. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy's first name, but anyway, they're all camping there. The FBI showed up one morning, did not identify themselves. They said that they were looking for some. They were looking for Jimmy. They were looking for a guy who was under suspicion for stealing some boots. So they showed up on the showed up on the Jumping Bull Ranch without announcing themselves. The Indians thought they were under attack from the Goons, the Guardians of the Oglala Nation, which was a paramilitary force that the president of the Pine Ridge, the tribal president, had formed in order to take care of traditionals. At that point in time, the murder rate on the Pine Ridge Reservation was the highest in the nation. So the Indians believed they were under attack. They had no idea who was pulling up on their property, and the firefight broke out. In that firefight, the two FBI agents were killed. They were shot. One of the Indians was also killed. What happened is, well, it's hard to say what happened because somebody killed those agents, but it wasn't Leonard Peltier. And the Indians know who it was, but they would never gave the person up. They did not know that these two agents were FBI agents when they were shot, but they were shot nearly at point blank range. But it wasn't Leonard Peltier. Once again, the Indians thought they were under attack. They were defending themselves. So there was one trial where Dino Butler and Bob Robideau were both acquitted because they presented the evidence in court that they thought they were under attack, that it was a matter of self-defense. They were acquitted. But the FBI still wanted to find a scapegoat. That scapegoat was Leonard Peltier. And in the subsequent trial and the case, the FBI and the government falsified ballistics evidence. They invented witnesses who didn't even know Leonard Peltier. And worst of all, they didn't allow the evidence that was presented in the first trial to be allowed in Leonard's trial. So he was convicted of murder and received 2 life sentences. Now, after that, every president refused to pardon him. The FBI took a very active part in making sure that he wasn't released. And so he spent 45 years in prison. While he was in prison, he became a tremendous painter, doing Native American scenes. He also was nominated for the Nobel Prize 6 times for his work on behalf of indigenous peoples. So he was a very, very outspoken and peaceful advocate for indigenous peoples behind bars. Regardless of that, he was kept in prison until just last week when Joe Biden did pardon him. Now, we expected Obama to pardon him. There was a huge campaign 8 years ago. That didn't happen. We never expected Trump to pardon him. Clinton, we expected him to pardon him. And I remember at that time, David, I can't think, the guy, the big movie guy, I'm losing it this morning.
Geffen?
David Geffen, yes, he was furious and refused to support Bill Clinton when he was. He refused to support Hillary Clinton. He was so angry about that when she ran for president. So that's the story of Leonard. So I always took an interest in the case. I assigned 2 interviews with Leonard while I was at High Times. Peter Gorman, the late Peter Gorman, interviewed him as well in 1992. And in 2016, I visited Leonard in prison and wrote a story about the case for High Times magazine. So I've been in contact with Leonard for many, many years, and I've been really honored the fact that he used many of my photographs to inspire his paintings. And I think we're going to show some of those today. But Leonard is a tremendous guy. He really is. He was a very, very friendly when I met him. This is a picture from prison, Coleman, in Coleman, Florida. So when I visited him, he was the nicest guy, so friendly. It was really, really tragic to sit there and listen to him and talk to him and know what he's been through for 45 years in prison. So now he's been released. He's still under house arrest. He's in very, very poor health. He has diabetes. He's going blind, and he has some prostate problems as well. So he's 80 years old now, and I think it's great that he can spend the rest of his days on the outside. But geez, it took a long time, and it was a real stain on the U.S. government, the fact that somebody like Leonard could be in jail for that long when other people are being released. Other people with murder sentences are being released far, far earlier. It was a campaign on behalf of the FBI and others to keep him in jail. They wanted to keep their scapegoat. It's all there is to it. I've talked to many, many people, many of the lawyers who have defended Leonard over the years, and they said the FBI took an active part in making sure that he stayed in prison.
Well, wasn't the arresting officer didn't he actually recant his original statement and where he felt that Leonard was not the actual perpetrator of the murder?
Yes, that's true. That's true. As a matter of fact, many people looked at the evidence and said this can't possibly be true. There were many people who said that over the years, it was many world leaders were adamant that he should be released from prison. And so it was amazing that our government refused to listen to these people and kept him in prison for this long.
Why did they pick on him in particular, of all the people who were there at the movement?
Well, you remember, this was the American Indian movement, and remember, this was a very, very grassroots struggle. These people were very, very poor. Leonard was one of the he wasn't a leader in the American Indian movement. He was if you will, a soldier. So on that day of the arrest of the gunfight, they were camped out by the creek on the Jumping Bull Ranch, and they were basically learning how to survive. They were teaching the younger ones how to battle the government. So Leonard was on the FBI's radar, but he certainly was not a leader. He was a soldier, coming to the communities and trying to organize people. And on the Pine Ridge Reservation, where the conditions were so horrible, despite in addition to the goon squads that were traveling around shooting people, killing people, the conditions on the Pine Ridge Reservation were beyond poverty, and they have been for some time. So that's what AIM started in the 60s, because they realized that the Native Americans of this country were being overlooked, and they were being squashed. So a number of people started in Minnesota with the Bellecourt brothers, John Trudell, a number of people. They were the ones who brought AIM to the forefront, and it became a national movement. And they accomplished many great things, especially when they marched on Washington and went to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and took over the building. I mean, that was in the middle of everything. And people, this really, really got international attention. So AIM was very, very successful. AIM also has, there are certain things that AIM did because, the COINTELPRO invaded them. They had there were some government agents who got on the inside and created unrest, and there was a lot of suspicion. And that's a whole different story altogether. But some of the things that AIM did were not great. We're not good.
Well, I think it's important for millennials and Zoomers and the generations who weren't around, during the 70s to really understand, the whole atmosphere in America in the late 60s with the civil rights movement, with the anti-Vietnam War movement, and the fact that the American Indian movement has modern parallels in what we might see in like the Black Lives Matter movement that we saw take off in the in the early 2020s, and that the same things that were happening to the civil rights movements in the 60s, like you said, with the FBI and U.S. intelligence agencies, especially those led by the Nixon administration, wanting to tap down on any type of civil unrest or civil discord, and enforce this law and order type of U.S. policy domestically, and they were casualties of that. With, like you said, with COINTELPRO, with the FBI, implanting and putting agents to cause the movement, to push them to become violent, so they could have a reason to raid them, to arrest them, like you said, to frame the leaders like Leonard Peltier, in these type of stings and such. And it's just a shame that that history is not taught to us in school.
Right.
Carlos, talk to me as a millennial. Did any of this stuff ever come up in our curriculum in high schools or
No.
even in college?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, the thing to remember, during the shootout, there were, I know one of the women who was there. She was 14 years old at the time. These were teenagers who were camping out, and a few elders, not elders, but older people who were protecting these people who were considered traditionals. The traditionals on the Pine Ridge Reservation were the ones under attack by the goons. So they were there camping on a summer morning, June 26th. Interesting, the day after the anniversary of the Custer's last stand. So it's kind of interesting. June 25th is now a national holiday on the Pine Ridge Reservation, but June 26th is the day that Leonard Peltier and the shootout took place. But remember, these were young people. These weren't AIM warriors armed to the teeth. These were young people, and they had no idea what was going on. They heard shooting. A firefight broke out before Leonard even got involved in the shootout. They ran to see what was happening. They figured that the goons were there once again, shooting, firing on people. But it was two FBI agents who apparently did not follow procedures and identify themselves. They roared onto the Jumping Bull Ranch. They jumped out of their cars, and a firefight ensued. So there's a big misconception that the Indians were violent or were armed to the teeth, and they were there to take out the FBI agents. That's not the case at all. Jean Roach, who was there at 14 years old, said it was one of the scariest things she ever experienced. These are young people, and she took off, running for their lives. The amazing thing is, with all of this government presence of all kinds of troops of every kind, the Indians escaped. They took off over the hills and were not found, and they all scattered. So all of these people, they were picked up later, of course, but this was an amazing story. If everybody wants to read the whole story, read In the Spirit of Crazy Horse by Peter Matheson, which explains the entire situation and what transpired after that.
Malcolm, one of the things I want folks to really walk away from, especially for those of us who aren't as educated on the American Indian movement, and you've been there to document a lot of these folks, over the years, through your photographs and through your interviews and such, is that they were really focused on the mistreatment of their peoples, in the modern era. So many of us, we get in just, a brief touch in school, in the 8th grade social studies and a little bit of high school. And, people forget that Native Americans are still here. They still face discrimination. Up until the modern 20th century, they were still being forcefully sterilized in certain hospitals and clinics. They're brutalized in urban cities, out west, for trying to seek jobs. I mean, all the things that we have seen from every oppressed group in this country is still happening, to Native Americans. I was just reading that part of Trump's argument to get rid of birthright citizenship is they're arguing that Native Americans aren't United States citizens.
Right.
And that's how they're arguing the whole jurisdictional issue of not giving people birthright citizenship.
Right. Well, that's not going to fly for sure. But the Indians love that. They're listen. People think that I remember asking Russell Means. I interviewed him. The great he passed away in 2009, I believe, 2010. But he was an AIM leader, and I asked him, what do you think America's conception of Native Americans is? Because there is no conception. They don't even know we're here. We're invisible. Yeah. And here's the thing that's even worse is that history, as we know, is not being taught. The Trail of Tears is not being taught. They don't want to talk about Juneteenth. They don't want to talk about that. But the fact is, knowing this stuff makes our nation stronger. It's all there is to it. Knowing what our government has been capable in the past helps us not repeat those mistakes in the future. But when
I am waiting to see if Trump actually defunds the Indian Health Service, which as it stands right now is already struggling. It has been for many, many years.
Absolutely.
That's why I hope Leonard is actually getting better care than what he could get from the IHS.
Oh, I think Leonard at this point has a lot of supporters. He has a lot of well wishers. I think they're going to try to make sure that he has the best years of his life at this point. So, but far as
privatizing the IHS would not be good any more than, from what I hear, he wants to privatize the VA.
Yeah, he wants to privatize everything. The post office.
So Musk can buy it, right?
Yeah. So whatever. It's a very disturbing time right now in our country. It really has. I mean, it has been. And when you think, when you think about the Obama years, and here we are now, how did this happen? I
actually thought Obama was going to pardon it because Obama worked so hard to actually get those treaties paid off.
It was amazing that he didn't. I would absolutely. Everybody was astounded that he did not. I remember talking to Chauncey Peltier, Leonard's son, and he was furious. He said, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us now? It's just Biden, it took 8 years, but after Obama, but Leonard's out. That's the best part.
For those who are not familiar, there was a lawsuit because of that. We had all these unpaid treaty funds fees for stolen land that was taken over for oil production and things of that sort that had been going on for years and years. And Obama actually got that amount paid back to the various tribes, various nations.
That's great. But remember how much just think how much in oil, in gold and silver was taken out of reservations, which they never saw anything. That was just stolen. All of those minerals those were taken off reservations in the gold of the Black Hills, the silver in Colorado. No, the tribes got none of that. So
there are some tribes out there. There are some nations that are actually considering getting involved in the cannabis industry as sovereign nations within their own states, because especially in states that are dry.
Right. Well, there are dispensaries now on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And there are a number of tribes that are trying to grow. It doesn't get enough attention, but they certainly are aware of what kind of economic sovereignty this might bring to their land, and that's what it's all about. But I don't think sovereignty is really even an issue as long as so many Native Americans are still receiving federal funds. So the Native Americans, I know they talk about sovereignty, but you're still taking money from the government. So.
And that always
here in Florida, the Seminoles seem to have a grip on the executive branch.
Yeah.
When it comes to them saying, "Let us make a couple million, and we'll send your educational budget a couple million after we make a couple billion off the." This is interesting because Seminoles, all they had was like a dusty old bingo hall in Miami for a while. That all of a sudden, now they have an empire.
Yeah. There are a few, most of these, the Pine Ridge has a casino too. Nobody's getting rich off the casino.
And in Nevada, you have the Lutz, I think they're called. They have the Nuwu dispensary, which is a place you can go where they don't charge tax because you can't charge the sovereign tax. And for those who have been there, they have a huge variety of stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
And excellent products. Medellín. They all work through the Nuwu dispensary over there, and it's wonderful. It's like 100,000 square feet of space there.
It takes time. The only problem is that a lot of it is not integrated solely on the reservation. You have a lot of people coming in from the outside who are taking licensing fees, and who are so there are a lot of people outside the reservation who are involved in these matters. So I think I'm not sure if the wealth that is being accrued is being evenly distributed on native land.
Malcolm, we talked a little bit about the erasure and the just non-teaching of things that affect Native Americans, in this country and in the First Nations. And, one of the things that's kind of brought it back into the American psyche is our TV shows and our media, Taylor Sheridan shows, Yellowstone, the fact that, like you just said, folks have casinos, and there's this perception that if you run a casino, you're getting rich, but sometimes you're just breaking even or even losing money if you're not getting the tourist dollars you need.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
It's I think it's great what's happening in entertainment. By the way, some of the shows that are coming out based on our Native American stories, like Reservation Dogs, was a great series, and you have Dark Winds, and there have been a number of movies. Lily Gladstone, who was in The Killers of the Flower Moon, which I thought was an awful movie, by the way, but my 2 cents. But listen, there are a lot of Native American stories to be told. And War Pony, another one that came out last year, which is a great little movie. So it's wonderful. And for so long you had people who weren't Native Americans playing Native Americans. Now, as a former actor, I have actors should be able to play any part they want, but obviously when Native Americans are being discriminated against and not getting these parts, they were angry, and they should be.
Sure.
So you're seeing a lot more Native American actors and actresses who are doing great work, and I think that's wonderful, because these Native American stories are fascinating. People should know about what families had to deal with when their children were taken from them and put into these private schools that were, in sometimes nearly concentration camps. When you get down to it, these kids were abused, they were murdered, and everybody. I know many people who have stories about that. Leonard was in a school, and he talked about that. So. Yeah, it's
well, as we talk about the different groups of folks who are trying to gain economic prosperity, especially when you think about where a lot of reservations are and away from urban centers, and the fact you'll have to drive hours to go to a job, that sort of thing. We're talking about the transition into the cannabis industry and even hemp industry, and you've actually documented some of this and taken some photos. I know Carlos has some he was going to queue up. Why don't you walk us through some of these photos of folks getting into the hemp and cannabis industry from Native American groups?
Yeah, we're on them, Carlos. What you got? Yeah, I mean, my first project was the Navajo Hemp Project in 1996, but we'll start right here. This is a field on Alex Whiteplume's property. They grew hemp 3 years in a row. All right, and finally the crops were rated each time. Finally, after the third crop, a federal injunction was slapped on Alex to stop him. But the interesting thing is, after the first crop was rated, the DEA and so forth dragged away the crops and spread seeds everywhere. So that shot that you just had up, Carlos, that's what thank you, DEA, for doing such a wonderful job. This is all wild hemp that was growing on the field because they left seeds everywhere. So that was a $500,000 probably raid, and the hemp was then growing everywhere. This is a hemp house that was built. That's all hemp materials those are hempcrete blocks on the side. That was built in Slim Butte on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Very, very nice house. And this is the hemp that was used to do that. All this hemp was harvested in Nebraska in the middle of the night. And they put it on trucks and brought it back to the Pine Ridge Reservation because it's illegal. You're not supposed to be harvesting hemp. This was during the illegal times. And this is Tom Cook. He led the Lakota Hemp Project. He was a Mohawk married to Loretta Afraid-A-Bear, who is a Lakota tribal member. And so he and Loretta's uncle spearheaded the move to grow hemp on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So this is a funny story. This is Alex Whiteplume with his grandson, and this is the second crop that was grown, which I was at as well. And so they're just planting seeds, and there was really an interesting time because they prayed over this, they marched on it, they had speakers before they grew the hemp, and so it was a really exciting time. That was the thing about people who don't realize, when it was illegal, it was a lot more fun. There was a lot more fun things going on. It was sexy, it really was. So to do things like that, to grow hemp on the Pine Ridge Reservation when it was illegal, and to do these kind of things, it was really, really a lot of fun. I couldn't have imagined doing this. This is Merwin Lynch. He's passed away. This was 1996. The activists brought 100 pounds of seeds out of the Navajo Reservation, and they planted hemp there. The Wide Ruins chapter had legalized hemp, so they didn't get any interference from the governor for some reason, but the reason probably was because there was a terrible drought on the reservation and this hemp did not grow. So, but anyway, they were weaving hemp. They were taking wild hemp and weaving Navajo rugs from it. There was a great movement on the Navajo reservation for hemp.
Is that what this is?
This is all hemp that the Navajo weavers colored by hand to make their Navajo rugs. Yeah. So this is Joe American horse. There was wild hemp growing on the Pine Ridge Reservation prior to the Lakota Hemp Project. Back in the early 1900s, Jesuits ran a school there, and they were growing hemp there on the land. And so these are the progeny of plants grown, a century ago. And so these were just growing wild. They were huge. This is Alex Whiteplume's daughter, Rosebud, and she's standing in that field the second year. This field had been prayed over, and this is what they called this on the second year. They didn't go near this field, but they called it the FBI field because this is what the FBI planted. So Rosebud put on her jingle dress and she posed with some plants, and this was in High Times magazine. This was the story. This is pot. This is not hemp. I did some stories with the Tuscarora Indians. A couple of brothers were under arrest for trying to grow 200 plants. They were eventually, they got a very, very light sentence. But I took this shot of their Northern Lights there, and they gave me some accoutrement.
Carlos, go back to that Northern Lights shot real quick. Malcolm, what year was this taken?
This was taken in 1990.
Mid to late 90s.
Mid 90s.
I just look at the looseness of the buds. Today the buds are all compact, right, that are grown, and see how the genetics are just changing in 20 years.
So this was some of the best pot I ever smoked. It really was. It was outstanding outdoor pot. And these guys had seeds from way, way back, and they were master growers. These two brothers. They one of them has passed on. He was the one who I did most of my stories with. But I set this up. I put my jacket down. You can see the seam of my jacket there, right, for a backdrop. And they gave me the pipe and the feathers and the rattle, and so I shot this, and this ran at High Times as well. This is the man we saw before, Joe American horse. He was standing there next to the plant on the Pine Ridge Reservation. This is him. He wore his headdress there, and this is his niece planting hemp. And this was the first planting in 2000. This is his niece Loretta Fredeberg growing planting hemp there once again, and that's him as well. So they're they were very, very. They looked at hemp as an avenue to tribal sovereignty, an economic boost to the tribe. That's why they were doing it, and also there was a certain amount of getting in the face of the government, because believe me, they haven't forgotten anything. I remember once saying that, to a prominent Indian. I said, "Are Native Americans, do they ever get complacent?" He goes, "No, man, it's all still right there." Something like Wounded Knee, which happened in 1890. What you might call it, historical. What do you call it when combat veterans? What do you call it?
PTSD.
PTSD. It's historical PTSD. It's practically hardwired into the genetics. The way they were treated, the things that have happened. So it's right there on the surface. I mean, so you start going after the Indians, saying they're not tribal citizens, they're not U.S. citizens or something like that, you're going to get a big, big pushback. So
you talk about the fact that they live on sovereign land. So why would they get arrested for growing something on sovereign land when they are not essentially in that spot in the United States? They're in their own sovereign country.
That's when the government says you're on it's federal land. That's what they're saying. And even though the Lakota had a tribal ordinance that allowed them, that was passed in order to allow them to grow hemp, the DEA, the tribal police, and the FBI came in and raided on 2000 it was like a SWAT team coming with heavy weaponry to raid a field that is a quarter acre. That's all it was. I mean, for God's sake, this is our tax dollars at work right there. $500,000 spent to raid a quarter acre of hemp. Was
that part of the marijuana eradication project?
No, this was separate. Listen, this happened. That raid happened, by the way, on the same day that Woody Harrelson was acquitted. Now, on that day, I was with Woody Harrelson when he was being acquitted for planting 4 seeds of hemp in 1996. And I followed that case all the way through. So he got through, and then in 2000, he was acquitted by a jury in Kentucky on the same day the FBI raided Alex Whitebloom's crops. Now, that is not a coincidence, okay? That is real. They're just that's the federal government saying, fuck you. That's basically what it's saying. We're going to, so they went after the Indians that day.
Now, Malcolm, obviously you've been an amazing journalist over the years, taking photos of so many great folks. But where was it, or what moved you, of being, into the American Indian movement to document their struggles? Where did that connection come from for you?
Yeah, well, it's in 1991. I was invited. No, it's actually 1990. I was invited out to the Ute Reservation in southern Colorado, and I was allowed to do a Native American church ceremony, which is the peyote ceremony. And it was a very, all I'll say, it was a very transformational night for me. You go into the teepee at sunset and come out at dawn, and there's praying through the night. You sit there all night, you pray, and the peyote allows you to have certain insights, visions, whatever you want to call them. And I guess I came out of that teepee with this, I hate to say calling, I don't want to sound like an idiot, sound like a dope, but I have been doing this ever since. So it's 35 years, and my archive of Native American work is pretty substantial. And I've been able to I've interviewed Leonard Peltier, Dennis Banks, Russell Means, the Bellecourt brothers, Clyde and Vernon, John Trudell, got to know very, very well. So I've been really, really fortunate to meet all these people and to be, part of this history. I mean, I was still, a youngin' back in the 70s or early 70s. I mean, I was, 19, 20 years old, just, getting out of college and stuff. So I didn't pay all that much attention. I mean, I certainly read the newspapers and knew this was happening, but I never dreamed that 15 years later I'd be, on this road.
Well, I'm glad that you've had this journey, because y'all hear my son in the background, but it's like for him, he'll grow up in a world most likely where cannabis is legal, that people aren't arrested or persecuted or have feds raiding their lands. So you've literally documented a living history in your journalistic career, but also you've documented a history that has been whitewashed, swept under the rug, and deleted. For millennials and Zoomers, Carlos and myself, we knew nothing of the American Indian movement, until people like yourself brought it into the mainstream for us and showed us, what the real history has been. So thank you is what I'm really trying to say.
Well, I'm glad you used the word whitewash. I remember last year, I think it was last year, they found there was a man on the up in North Dakota who was saying that he was a direct descendant of Sitting Bull, and he was always disputed. And then they came across a braid of Sitting Bulls, and they were able to do the DNA. And in fact, he was a direct descendant. But here's how it was reported. They said the braid was found in the Smithsonian Institute for some reason. Now, this is CBS News. For some reason, this is a complete scandal that there are all kinds of Native American relics and bones at the Smithsonian. So they say for some reason it was there. And they say that after Sitting Bull died, no, Sitting Bull was murdered along with his kids and 4 other people. I mean, what are they talking about? They say he died. No, he wasn't died. He was murdered by the U.S. government. So this is the kind of whitewash we're talking about. It makes the national news. Sitting Bull's direct descendant, but they don't tell the story. So they leaves out so many facts. And
it's kind of like what the British Museum did to Egypt and so many of the other antiquities that they absorbed, and how all those relics somehow managed to be in the British Museum.
How did they get there? Geez, I wonder, Somebody cut off Sitting Bull's braid and it got to the Smithsonian. Stop with this shit. I get so tired of it. Just like, somebody on the news here, why Trump is so great. He talks like most people talk. No, he doesn't. Not the people I know. What are you talking about? He doesn't.
Well, also the same folks who also say that he never lies, and that in and of itself is a lie.
Right. Anyway, but I don't want to get on Trump. Will be here the rest of the
Malcolm, you mentioned the Native American Church, and to be honest with you, any bit of information I have on Native Americans has come from something out of the Native American Church. Can you kind of explain how important that whole religious movement is?
Not all Indians are interested in the Native American Church, and many people believe that we have our own ceremonies. The Native American Church wasn't established until the early 1900s. A lot of people say that Quanah Parker, the great Comanche chief, was responsible for starting the Native American Church. They say it was based on some other ceremonies. But anyway, Quanah wanted to make sure that he felt that people were losing their sense of being Native. And so he felt that this ceremony was an all-inclusive ceremony that tribes could take part in and once again discover their sense of being an Indian. So that's where it started in the 1900s. Now, many tribes have a Native American church. There are chapters everywhere. But, as I say, a lot of Indians have no time for it. A lot of Indians don't like the idea of drugs, like peyote, of taking drugs in order to enhance their spirituality. So, but the fact is, it's the Native American church is tolerated. As I said, I've been to a few ceremonies, and it's always it's difficult. It's difficult because you have to really, really concentrate and be quiet. You're sitting there all night long, but it's difficult. But it's through pain and suffering, I suppose you get some insight into what this universe is about.
Well, not too long ago, there was a giant powwow over in Colorado in a stadium. They had everybody out there in their regalia dancing at the same time. And looking out over the stadium, I was absolutely astounded as to the variety and just the massive amount of traditionalism from the 500 nations essentially coming together like that. And it was awe-inspiring.
Well, it's just, I think the spirit is getting stronger. With Native Americans, at the same time, the older people, worry about their youth because they're subject to the same thing that non-Indian youth is subject to. The media, social media, all of those things. Losing their sense of family. The quest for materialism. Those kind of things. Many the elders worry about. So. I think there's great spirit at these powwows, and the great spirit. And Pine Ridge is for as poverty stricken as it is, as many problems as it has. So many beautiful people there. It's a beautiful land. Indians are different than us. It's all there is to it. They have a different way of looking at it. I don't want to be so general, but they have a different way of looking at the world, and a lot of people don't want to see that perspective lost because of our society, the way it runs here in the United States. Anyway,
I hate to get away from this topic, but it is somewhat adjoined, and I think now now that Biden is no longer in office, we can tear him down if we like. He made a massive amount of pardons before he left.
Right.
They were saying, it was all going to be for nonviolent crimes and things of that sort, and yet. I find out later on that a very small percentage of them were actually those people who were in prison for marijuana offenses.
Very few.
Yeah.
There are very few pardons. I mean, everybody. I mean, Christ Almighty! If Trump is going to pardon all these assholes from January 6th, it would stand to reason you would pardon guys who were dealers and growers and smokers. My God, I mean that's the ultimate nonviolent crime.
Well, I'm going to get into trouble for this, but he also pardoned Ross Ulbricht, who had the largest black market narcotics sales organization on the dark web, and was serving 2 20-year sentences for it, but was automatically pardoned. And the libertarians are jumping for joy, saying, "Fantastic!" because this guy also promoted cryptocurrency.
Right.
Well, the Silk Road, Gary, for those who that's who Gary was just talking about, is the guy who invented the Silk Road. For those who remember, the early 2010s and the Silk Road, and how it was crazy thing. If you could get access to it on the dark web. I mean, I remember someone showing me like, look, you can buy this and you can buy that. I'm like, that's nuts. You can buy heroin and cocaine and crack, and they deliver right your, wherever you need it delivered to. And I'm just like, and then they're showing me, yeah, they got firearms and you can even buy people. And I'm like, what? And his defense was, I didn't know. I just made the platform. I didn't know people were doing that on my platform.
I was only just maintaining it. That's all.
Right, exactly. I remember at High Times, just we were all looking at this. Is this real? It was the same reaction. Is this actually happening? And then they got busted big time.
Yeah.
But,
Malcolm, one of the things that I that in this topic that makes me concerned just in the past week is what we saw happen with the Dakota Access Pipeline and Standing Rock
right.
during the first Trump administration. Here we are, Trump 2.0, with essentially a lame duck with unlimited power because he doesn't have to worry about re-election consequences.
Actually, I believe the Standing Rock happened primarily in Obama's administration.
Yeah, at the end of the Obama, and then but it dragged on.
Yeah, it started in like this the spring summertime went on. I was there in November of that year, October of that year, 2016.
Yes. That ridiculous pipeline situation. Yeah, it comes through Canada and then it cuts across our country and it destroys all the land in between its beginning and its end. I think Trump's solution to this is to annex Canada. I guess because the Sudetenland is already taken.
Solid World War II reference, Gary.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm a boomer.
My dad was greatest generation. So there. Right now, what are you talking about, Gary?
Gary was drawing parallels of Trump wanting to annex Canada and Hitler wanting to annex Bavaria.
Ain't gonna happen. But honestly, the pipeline. The thing is, this. Enbridge keeps saying that they're completely safe. There have been so many leaks on every goddamn pipeline. It's absolutely ridiculous. They keep saying they're completely safe. There won't be any leaks. And this is the worst kind of oil, up in North Dakota, the worst kind of stuff for the environment, the worst kind of stuff for the land. When it leaks, the land is destroyed for centuries. This is it's so criminal. You think sometimes, I say this sometimes, 150 years ago, if you poison the water, like if they did to Lake Champlain and Lake Erie back then, if you poisoned a water source, living out, you were dead for doing that, and it just seems there's no consequences for this horrible pollution, which they know knowingly, Lake Champlain completely destroyed, by I forget who was, I can't remember. I'm just drawing blanks this morning.
Let's just remember that the EPA was developed by the Nixon administration, in part to clean up a lot of the issues, like in regards to Lake Erie, which started to no longer freeze up anymore because of the high amount of pollution with all the steel plants, and everything else that was surrounding it.
We call it catch fire sometimes. That was always pleasant.
Malcolm, you bring up a good point. Is that the idiocracy of some of these policies around energy and the environment are so blatantly dumb that they almost seem intentional, like they want to poison the land because they want to favor the oligarchs who already own tons of farmland, that they want to poison, just the idea to say, hey, let's bring dirty tar sand petroleum from Canada, run it down the breadbasket of America all the way to Texas, and we'll be fine. It won't leak. It won't destroy, I don't know, the main food source for the vast majority of the world. Come on.
It's greed. As simple as that. It is simple greed that I want more. I want more. When we know that wind power is a great source of energy and solar power is a great source of energy, we should be developing these things. But what does Trump do? He goes on a rant against windmills. I mean, this was only a week and a half ago where he went in a completely unhinged rant against wind turbines. It just, it boggles the mind. And who buys this idea? Who is buying this shit? The fact is, we have an extremely uneducated country. People who are not reading the news. The fact that we don't have newspapers anymore, and people have to go to the internet in order to read stuff. They're reading, they're by choice now. We don't have responsible journalists out there. Look what's happened to the Washington Post, for God's sake. the nice thing is that they're losing circulation by the hundreds and thousands because people are not going to put up with this stuff. But it's the LA Times too, and New York.
Luckily, the Wall Street Journal seems to be talking truth to power right now, which was really shocking.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Even when smart people, like you said, you have smart people. Like I said, Carlos, myself, we're younger, but we don't have access to information, or truthful information, and then it's, even what used to be considered fringe information is shocking, in a lot of ways, in that now it's mainstream. There's entire streaming channels of conspiracy theory stuff out there. It's like they took ancient aliens and made them why is that on the goddamn History Channel?
They're getting equal credence. Getting the newspaper every day on your front lawn, going out there in the morning to get it was a great thing. And if you had a responsible newspaper that which we don't have many right now, it was then this is the result.
And the funny thing about the old newspapers, the comics used to be in the back. Now they're on the front page.
Well said, Gary.
I'm honestly so fortunate that I'm part of this organization, and that we actually go and we're a part of the process. You know what I mean? Like the fact, what I know because we're part of the process, and what I wouldn't know outside of that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, you actually see the wizard in how he's making the sausage, and not believing the illusion that they're putting out.
Yeah, like a lot of the people that show up in headlines and are held in high regard in these conservative worlds, I've shaken their hand. I know how much of a fucking
how many conspiracy theories were actually broadcast in High Times?
Oh, not really all that much. We weren't. That really wasn't what we were about. I mean, I remember publishing a kind of an outlandish story, feature story, that Joan of Arc was on mushrooms. But it was somebody had done some research, and it was kind of shady. But I said, "What the hell?" I thought, and it was fun, and people loved it. They loved it. But it's possible, maybe whatever she was doing under this tree when she saw got her visions. Perhaps it was mushrooms. Maybe that was the reason.
I thought it was anointing oil, actually, but
no, we weren't really into that. I mean, we really wanted to break stories. And I know for one, Peter Gorman, who was a writer for a long time, did some tremendous work. Brought some stories to the forefront that also he covered the entire Green Merchant episode in the early 90s when the government tried to shut down High Times by going after its advertisers and going after the people who were selling hydroponic equipment. They started subpoenaing the records of UPS so they could find out who's buying hydroponic equipment. And suddenly you had the DEA showing up at people's doors. Say, what are you growing back there? So Peter called it marijuana McCarthyism. If you bought hydroponic equipment, you must be a pot grower. And this is true. A lot of people went to jail for this. But,
we're talking like 1977, 1978, actually 1976. The paraquat information was leaking forth into the universities, and people were telling us it was a fraud, it was a fake, it was a conspiracy theory. The government would never do that to their own people, and yet they were. So actually, the mainstream media at that point in time was actually covering up for the government, because the government was fucking up royally.
No, the media is not. They've done their very, very poor job at times too. But one thing they never covered Trump as bad as they should have been much tougher on Trump, the first time around.
We got a lot of friends who voted for Trump, and they're still my friends.
Especially during the election, with Hillary. They kind of figured he'll never get it. All the polls were wrong, and they never thought he was going to, win. And so,
Gary, I got to correct you there. All these folks that you said were friends, they are no longer friends to me. I mean, the fact that certain people who we've considered friends have been emboldened to say things like, "Oh, you better get ready. We're going to deport your son," or "Oh, that tell Carlos to go back to Cuba." Those are not friends. These people are neo-Nazi sympathizers. And if that hurts your feelings, if you go to a rally and someone has a Nazi flag and they're not getting kicked out of the rally, you are at a Nazi rally.
That's right. That's right. Well, look at some of the stuff that Elon Musk is written supporting these far right extremist groups in Germany. I mean, if it walks like a Nazi and talks like a Nazi and quacks like a Nazi, you're a Nazi. You know?
Well, I think a lot of people, they expected Obama to do something in regards to legalization, and it never happened.
No.
It never happened. One
But
term went by, another term went by.
Still, I get being upset at Democrats. All right. I get being upset at the Democratic Party. There's a lot of shit Kano can fucking point out that I'm sure he'd be more than happy to point out that are issues with the Democratic Party. But
that's why they don't take his calls.
Why would you hand over everything to the enemy? Why would you be like, you know what, we were doing good, let's just go ahead and just eradicate all the progress that we've gone through?
Because they've been duped into believing that he will make the change that they want. But the fact is, all he's doing is saying in a circumspect kind of way the things that they want to hear, but not necessarily anything he wants to believe. If anybody believes that Trump is going to be in favor of legalization, they really do need to get a good ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, these guys, they're against everything. They're against there's nothing they're for. That's the problem. There's nothing they support. It's all things they want to get rid of or squash down.
I think the disconnect really comes in at the fact that you see the oligarchs being able to smoke weed on the Joe Rogan podcast, and you think, oh, that's going to be good. They're going to legalize it, and this is going to be our guy. And it's like, no, there's a different group or a set of rules for those guys versus a set of rules for you. But somehow they've duped the average working man who's on their side to believing that those rules are going to trickle down, and that prosperity that these oligarchs have is going to trickle down. And they've been harping on that my entire life since the Reagan administration.
So trickle down economics, really. It's been disproven over and over again. It does not happen.
Well, you got some more amazing artwork, and I wanted to talk about some stuff. But before we move into that, as we're on the subject right now, one of the things we're talking about AIM, I want to make sure folks understand the American Indian movement is a group that has AIM. Then for us millennials, we know AOL Instant Messenger, but there's another AIM group out there, the American Identity Movement, which is a white supremacist group that was founded in response to Black Lives Matter here in America. So I don't want folks to get confused when we're using these acronyms. And I want to just be clear is that all the stuff that Malcolm has documented is around the American Indian Movement, not the Nazis that we're seeing marching in the streets, even though they got the same acronyms.
Right. Thank you.
So now you've had again. We talked about Leonard Peltier. He was wrongfully accused. He has spent years in federal prison, and you've had the opportunity to interact with him. And he's actually taken some amazing photographs and turned them into artwork. And I just, if you wanted to go through this and showcase some of the amazing art that he's done, I mean,
well, all of this stuff, I sent to him while he was in prison. This shot right here was I set this up at Native American's house. They had this on the wall, and so I just set up this little motif right here, and Leonard loved it, and he painted this. So this was just a still life. This was on Alex White Plume's land. This is a buffalo skull that was on a post, and Leonard painted this. So I'm just so pleased. When he found something. This was at a rally in 1993. There was I forget the name of the company, but there was a Crazy Horse malt liquor at the time. So this in City Hall, New York City, there was a big protest against this because this was an awful thing, calling a malt liquor Crazy Horse, who's a very venerated chief of the Oglala Lakota, considered really truly one of the the greatest Native Americans ever, great war chief. So anyway, Leonard took that shot and of the guy playing a flute and turned it into something else.
Now next up I have your white shot.
This is Tom Cook's daughter, very, very beautiful young girl. And she was a model in a hemp pictorial that I did for Hemp Times. I was also the executive editor of Hemp Times. And so Leonard took this, and I think he said that was him as a little baby. I think he painted himself. So I love what he's done with my photos right here. I took this shot up in the Black Hills And I just kind of waited for this lightning to strike, and I got lucky between these two teepees. And Leonard took this shot, and I think in the next shot you'll see what he did with it, if it comes up. Here it is. So he's done some wonderful work. He's here he is a self-taught painter, doing this for 45 years in prison. And if people can go, if you Google Leonard Peltier artwork, you can see the amount of stuff that he's done behind bars. Pretty amazing archive. What else you got? This is Deborah White Plume. She passed away 2 years ago. A great activist on the Pine Ridge Reservation. He was actually one of the people who was shot by the goons during those terrible times. She survived. She was shot in the arm, but she fought oil pipelines, and she fought the people who want to mine for uranium. Apparently, a lot of uranium preserves up in South Dakota on their reservation. So trying to stop that, which would ruin their water source. And this is Deborah White Plume's granddaughter. This is Trinity. And so he took this shot and turned it into a traditional Lakota child from years ago.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah. This is Susan Harjo. She's probably the most prominent female Native American activist in America. She's been honored. She got the Freedom Medal from George Bush. She's been a very, very strong advocate for Native Americans. So I shot this back a long time ago, 1992. She's still around. She's in a wheelchair now. I met her last year at a rally for Leonard Peltier in Washington, and still great, great, great woman. This is a Cree woman I shot up in Canada. I just saw her. I said, "Can I photograph you, please?" just so pretty. She said, all right. And I took it and sent it to Leonard. Leonard made her look a little bit about 45 years older, but that's all right.
I love the way you did work with the light on that one. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, no, she was a very, very beautiful girl. I took this shot in 1992. This is Sakakohe Marrero. And she was, this was at 1992 when Spain came to formally apologize for all the depredations they committed on Native Americans. I said, well, a little bit late, but 500 years later. This was Ava Carpentier. I took this in Malibu Creek Canyon. I met her and I said, I'd love to photograph you. And, Leonard took this shot. She's half Native from the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota. But she lives out in LA now. And I ran into her and I said, I'd love to photograph you. Very pretty girl. This is Christina Farrow. Took this out in outside of Las Vegas. She was kind enough to just go put on some regalia and just I think she's a little crazy looking. This is a Micmac girl up in Canada. She had some traditional clothing, and so this is great. I'm always so honored when Leonard has done this. But everything he has done is just been such a great reflection of my photos. I mean, I'm just so it's when you discover one of that he's done it again. It's wonderful. So when I went to meet him in prison, and I really, really thanked him profusely for that. And he just said, just keep sending me good photos. He said, but I get an awful lot of shot of women. Want to shoot.
Malcolm, where do those pieces of art that Leonard developed? Do they exist? Have they been put in museums? Have they been sold for good cause?
Well, I'm lucky enough to have an original he sent me, which was really, really great. But people can buy this. I think if you go to Leonard. Leonard. Well, if people just Google Leonard Peltier artwork, you're going to find the websites to where you can buy these prints.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of these prints are on sale. You can buy them in different forms, and they're still being sold. These websites are very, very active. And if you just Google Leonard Peltier artwork, you'll see the amount of stuff he's done. But you'll find it. People just have to go online, but check it out because these are wonderful things to have in your home, and you're supporting Leonard. So it's a great thing, and they're not expensive.
And too often, a lot of people when they talk about native work, all they do is put up Cocopellis all over the place.
Oh my God. Cocopellis and dream catchers. Yes, that's it. No, but support native artists, because if you want to really support really good native art, you can find it. You don't have to go to a roadside stand in Arizona.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing the Micmac Madonna on the website that you took the photo of.
Yeah,
so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm thrilled. Anything else, Carlos?
No, that's all I got.
Oh my God, I went through all of
Am I
it.
supposed to?
Oh no, this is great. No.
Yeah, we got like a good 15 picks.
Yeah,
that's great. I really appreciate you guys letting me show my photos, because it's one thing about being a photographer. You want people to see your photos. Otherwise, what's the point? So thank you very, very much for allowing me to be on the show today and talk about Leonard. Once again, he's out of prison. He's in home arrest or whatever the hell that entails. I think it's going to progress. Hopefully he'll get to go back to his land on his reservation, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to spend the rest of his life talking to the young people, inspiring them. So yeah, thank you for putting all these photos up here. There's Willie Nelson there. You just went by. See right there, Willie. We advertise.
Yeah, we sports those braids.
Yeah, man. So all of this. So there's the Micmac Madonna there, and the coming up there. So there's so many, but these are wonderful photos. You always trying to get good pictures of horses. That's one. He was always asking me to send him pictures of horses. But that there's a self-portrait there up in the right there that you just went by. See, that's on the self-portrait. In prison. So yeah. Painted
fantastic.
Yeah, so please, everybody, go if you're listening, or if you're looking for something as a great present, for something for great home decor, please check it out.
Now, Malcolm, your most recent publication, the Pot Shots, the Journey of a High Times Photographer.
That. Yeah, I published my book last year. Pot Shots, the Journey of a High Times Photographer. It has 330 shots. It has models. It has the icons of cannabis, leaders, all kinds of buds, gardens, a lot of all the top activists. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased with that. People can find that. Just go to potshotsbook.com or go to my website, malcolmmackinnon.com. You'll find it. It's a great gift, especially with 420 on the way. You have plenty of time. It costs as much as about a quarter ounce of pot. So, you can give up a quarter ounce. You can check out all my photos that I've taken over the years. I have
depending on what state you're in.
Quarter ounce by California standards, maybe.
We got some good dispensaries here in Long Island. I mean, seriously, I moved out from the city last year, and now I live out here in Long Island. There are 3 really good dispensaries nearby with some very reasonable prices. So it's encouraging.
New York's policies have been iffy at best.
Oh my God, complete mess like everywhere else. It really is. I mean,
we deal with Florida's mess, and we're also trying to deal with the national mess as well. I actually have a bill that I've written right now, but I'm reluctant to get it filed because it involves using cannabis for opioid remediation. But in order to do it, we actually have to have the rescheduling done so it can be verified federally as being medical, because right now there's a ban on cannabis use in rehab facilities in the state of Florida. And the federal law would go over that. So we're trying to do the best we can, but a lot of times it's national law that gets in the way. And to be honest with you, I can't see rescheduling actually happening right now because, well, I think Chris is going to go into that when it talks about the news. But it's been fucked up by the DEA itself.
Right, of course. They don't even understand the law. They don't even. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Schedule 2, anyways. I mean, all the scheduling, all of their classifications make no sense. So you have stuff lumped with other stuff that doesn't make any sense.
Well, actually, the Substance Abuse Act actually does state that the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General can actually deschedule cannabis. With from that aspect, I don't see Pam Bondi doing that.
Well, Malcolm, at the risk of sounding like a journalistic hack, what's next for you, man? Like, you've accomplished so much. You put out the book. I mean, where do you go from here? Do you go out in the pasture and just start smoking weed for the rest of your life, or do you feel like you still have more to accomplish?
I need a stained glass window in somewhere. That's how important I am. Somebody's got to create a stained glass window so I'm there forever. I'm marketing my photos as much as I can right now. I live out here, like I say, in Long Island right now. I've got a few job offers from dispensaries, but something, dude, I'm just not into working for a dispensary and being a shill for a dispensary. That's not where I'm at. So
brand ambassador.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can find these jobs, and I've had a couple interviews, but it's nothing that really interests me. I mean, it's hard right now to find great places to write and get paid for it in the right way, And also the great thing about High Times is I was able to travel extensively on their dime because we made money, especially with the cannabis cups and stuff like that. So I was able to travel nearly 1 million miles in pursuit of stories, so that ability is not available to me right now. But speaking of High Times, I suppose you're aware of the fact that they looks like they have just disappeared from the media landscape. And the Adam Levin, who was the rather shady CEO, has been indicted and charged, I believe, with money laundering and some very deceptive SEC practices. So please Google High Times bankruptcy, Google High Times, you'll find out. It's just, what a complete mess. I mean, it truly was. I mean, I left in 2017. I was fired. And from that point on, I'm not saying it was my firing that caused it, but from that point on, that's when everything went south, completely south.
Are the Marleys out?
Marleys were out long ago. All you people who bought High Times stock, way to go. You gave High Times a cash gift. You're not going to see any return on that money. They have so many lawsuits against them. It's a disgrace what happened. Listen,
and the red, white, and blue brands are gone too?
Everything's gone. I think the Cannabis Cup has been taken over by some other entity, but the magazine itself is not publishing. If you go to the website, nothing has changed since June, and all you see are gray boxes in place of photos. So it's been put that website up there. You can check that out. Somebody just put up the link where you can check out what happened.
So if you want to grow mushrooms, you can't actually get a coupon on High Times anymore. You've got to go to Chillum, CBD and mushroom dispensary.
See High Times right there. Can you read
Look at there's no picture.
2024. That's your High Times website now. I mean, what's really sad is it happened on the 50th anniversary of the magazine that it went under. So all of its assets are for sale. I've heard rumors that somebody has bought some of this stuff, but the fact is, with media, with anything, especially these days when people's attention span is so short, out of sight, out of mind. If you're not publishing, if you're not out there in front showing people who you are, people don't care anymore. They move on. So High Times, first of all, it's not the magazine it was, because it was an outlaw magazine. And that was what gave it its cachet. It was fun. It was sexy. It was outlandish. It was in the government's face. Now, how many other magazines are covering the same thing? Cannabis News. It's the same stuff. Bud Tender of the Month. I mean, who cares? I mean, seriously. No, I mean, seriously. If you look at, I hate to call them out, but Leaf magazines is some of the worst magazines I can possibly imagine. They're bad. They're boring. You have all this. You just wasted print. They're throwaways anyway, but they're good for rolling on. But
and that small magazine was New Leaf, right?
Yeah,
that one's
Freedom
gone
Leaf.
too.
Leaf. Well, that wasn't a bad magazine though. That was covering, that was actually covering, stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
That was Steve Bloom behind that. He did a good job with Freedom Leaf.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Freedom Leaf. Yeah.
Yeah. But
I talked to Steve a while ago. We're going to get him on the next couple of weeks. He didn't want to spoil didn't want to take any of your sunshine away, Malcolm.
Oh no, Steve and I are good friends. He's Steve is far more active on the cannabis scene than I am. I mean, he is totally involved. I mean, he really is. He runs the marijuana march every May, first Saturday in May here in New York, and he's always involved in something or other. He has a great website, celebstoner.com. He's got a very, very comprehensive website. So
I gotta say, Malcolm, you're talking about High Times at its heyday when you were there. I mean, I remember reading it in the early 2000s when I was in college, and it was more than just weed porn. It was, like you said, celebrity things. You guys had great growing tips, like Cervantes would always have a column, or something in there. And so it was a lot different than what we see in modern media, even today on just the internet. And people also, you even look at other publications like Playboy back in the 70s. It was more than just schmut. You actually had current events and topics that the mainstream media was scared to cover or wouldn't talk about.
Alternative consciousness was what it was about. I think that's what the thing there. We tried to figure out stuff that what stoners would be into. So there was news, but we did stuff on UFOs. We did a whole cover story of 1995 on UFOs. And it was like, take me to your dealer. That was the.
I've been trying to get the guy from Marijuana Moment to come on, but he says he doesn't like doing podcasts. But I did see an article that popped up today that mentions the fact that our bill, which protects parental rights here in Florida, has actually got 3 committees that it's been assigned to. That to me is not necessarily a news article as much as is just a notification that I get from the Senate. Mm-hmm. But if they want to push that as news, that's fine. Although it's so incomplete and so effuse that I don't consider that news at that point in time. We are fighting for this bill, and it's a step in the right direction. But in and of itself, it's not an article.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Malcolm, why don't you say some parting words to the viewers before we head into the news, and just tell folks how they can follow along and what you got next going on.
Okay. Thanks so much once again, guys, for having me. Once again, my name is Macolm Mackinnon, former editor-in-chief of High Times Magazine, and I've made my career being a photographer of the cannabis movement and also a great deal of Native American photography. I've been covering Native American issues for 35 years and I continue to do so. If you want to follow me, I'm at Mackinnon Photos, at Mackinnon Photos on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, and I'm on Blue Skye as well. So you can find me everywhere. And of course, my website is malcolmmackinnon.com. And it'll take you to all my shots, Native American shots and celebrity shots and so forth. So that's what I'm into right now. But follow me and buy my photos. That's the most important thing.
Breaking news: Dan Skye is on Blue Skye. I think that's wonderful.
On the loose. Well, you guys are great. This is like the 3rd or 4th time I've been on the show, and it's always fun. You guys are really smart. I mean, I think one of the better podcasts on the cannabis scene. I mean that seriously. You guys are up on the issues, and you're bright guys. I cannot stand yammering podcasts where people just talk and talk and talk and nothing is being said. So anyway,
we appreciate you, Malcolm.
Right.
Carlos, with that, I think it's time for the news. All right, let's kick the top of the news off. Very simple, going like we always do into amazing studies that are being published every single day around cannabis and showing exactly the medicinal value that we have. According to data published in the journal Addictive Behaviors, consumers engage in greater levels of physical activity on days they consume cannabis. Researchers affiliated with the University of Oklahoma assessed the relationship between cannabis use and moderate to vigorous physical activity in a cohort of 98 healthy middle-aged adults. For those of you who don't know what that is, that means those of you pretty much 40 and up. They found that participants typically engage in 31 more minutes of physical activity on days they consume cannabis. Patients also tended to consume more alcohol on days where they were most physically active. The observed positive associations between cannabis use and moderate to vigorous physical activity align with the hypothesis that they had in their previous observations. The findings are consistent with those of other studies, concluding that adults with a history of marijuana use typically exercise much more than their non-using peers. And among those aged 60 and older, marijuana use has been associated with increased exercise frequency. Shocker that your body probably doesn't hurt and isn't as sore when you're able to utilize cannabis to help mitigate those things. Now, moving on to other studies, survey data published in the journal Medicina, investigators affiliated with Simmons University in Boston surveyed 25 women who consume CBD to mitigate inflammatory bowel disease symptoms. Most of the participants obtain CBD products from state licensed dispensaries, and participants typically consumed an oral dose of 25 milligrams or less of CBD daily. And CBD users report a decrease in inflammatory bowel disease related pain and nausea, 67% versus 64% respectively, and an improvement in their appetite of 60%. The inflammatory bowel disease patients enrolled in the United Kingdom's medical cannabis registry actually have reported sustained improvements in their health related quality of life following their use of medicinal cannabis products, according to data that was published earlier this year in the journal Expert Review of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. Look, all in all, if you want to learn more about it, go to normal.org, read some of these amazing studies that are being put out. Also looking at some information coming out of Canada, according to data published in the journal Cannabis, Canadian investigators assessed the short-term effects of cannabis on chronic pain in a cohort of 741 individuals over a 3-year period, and patients report significant reductions in pain following cannabis use. Separate data published in 2023 in the Journal of the American Medical Association reported that nearly 1 in 3 patients with chronic pain use cannabis as an analgesic agent, and many of those do substitute it in place of opioids. So that bill that Gary has that he wants to see put forward in Florida, obviously we have some legal roadblocks with new laws that have been passed in the last couple of years under Ron DeSantis. But the fact is that that is something that could majorly help people get off of opioid addiction, especially those with chronic pain, especially those who have served our nation as veterans, after we know that how the VA was used as a guinea pig for to enrich the Sacklers in the Oxycontin epidemic that has been affecting the entire nation. Now, let's move past medical news and let's talk about politics in the news. All right. In particular, I'm going to be very critical here. So if you're a Republican and you really don't want to hear the news, especially being a Republican piehead, go ahead and put your fingers in your ear like you do most days when some bad news comes along. But here we go. A career drug warrior has been named acting DEA administrator, by Donald Trump. That is Derek S. Maltz. Maltz replaces the former administrator Ann Milgram, who departed the agency last week. Maltz worked within the DEA as a special agent for 28 years before retiring. Speaking to the press, he questioned the legitimacy of administration efforts under the Biden administration to reclassify cannabis under federal law, and his opinion was that they're placing politics above public safety. Now, he's been critical of legislative efforts to regulate adult use cannabis and has claimed that rising levels of THC are playing a role in the frequency of school shootings. So Trump's new head of the DEA says that marijuana is a gateway drug that causes psychosis, other mental health problems, and leads to an increase in school shootings. Like, just wow.
All right, so guns don't shoot people. Cannabis makes people go out and buy guns and shoot people.
And if that wasn't bad enough, the recent rescheduling hearings that we've had to reclassify cannabis, possibly to Schedule 3, were tainted by the DEA collaborating with smart approaches to marijuana, Sam, essentially to muck up the whole process. So the judge has pretty much delayed everything because the agency itself has sabotaged the hearings. The DEA is a rogue agency. It needs to be reined in. And if the Trump administration has any legitimacy when it comes to tackling pot prohibition, they do something about it. But he's not. And that is blatantly clear because Trump has appointed Pam Bondi to be the Attorney General of the United States. Now, for those of you from Florida, you know Pam Bondi very well because she was our Attorney General in Florida. Pam Bondi argued against the original Amendment 2 in 2014 and 2013 before the Supreme Court, trying to strike down medical marijuana in Florida. She is definitely not a friend to those in the cannabis sector. She has, been a lobbyist for Geo Group, one of the largest private prison companies essentially on the planet. And when she was asked cannabis questions in her confirmation hearings in front of the Senate, she pretty much dodged them, much in the same way when they asked her about birthright citizenship. She said she needed to do more research. And it's like, you're up for the largest job to run the Department of Justice. You would think that you would know a little bit about the Constitution. You wouldn't need to do more research on it. So this is not promising movement for folks in the cannabis industry. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news and put out gloom and doom, but these appointments are what they are. And these people have the records that they have. You know, I mean, hell, even the Secretary of Defense appointment, Pete Hegseth, went down to a tie vote. And I mean, you know, the guy has white supremacist tattoos on his chest, and he's now, you know, essentially the Secretary of Defense. So, you know, the Trump administration isn't draining the swamp; they're putting Swamp Thing in charge of the goddamn government. And so, you know, if we're going to move past what's happening with the federal government, let's talk about Florida. In Florida, we have a legislative session right now that's getting ready to gear up. We're still got a lot of bills that have to go through drafting. We're still shopping with bill sponsors because why? Because the political will in Florida to actually do anything is really linked to you got to do what Ron DeSantis wants you to do. Ron DeSantis right now, rather than dealing with issues that are important to Floridians, like their insurance or cannabis prohibition, wants to focus on kissing ass for the Trump administration in the hopes that, I don't know what, maybe he can set himself up to run for president on the same bullshit platforms in a few years. Maybe he wants to get an appointment into something, but he's called for a special session to waste tons of our tax dollars around, you know, issues that is not helping the average person. And on top of that, we're still going to see legislation come back to attack the hemp industry, which he said he wasn't going to let happen. And essentially Smart and Safe Florida, which was behind the 2024 statewide initiative to legalize adult retail sales of marijuana in Florida, has put it back in the signature gathering phase for 2026. But I want to pause that for a second. This special session that DeSantis has called wants to eliminate the ability to essentially have third-party petition gatherers gather your petitions. So you won't be able to essentially hire a company or people to go out and collect petitions for you if Ron DeSantis has his way, in addition to all the other bad policies that he wants to put out. So, you know, whether or not Smart and Safe Florida will even have the ability to make the ballot in 2026 through petition gathering is going to remain to be seen. Now, obviously, there's a lot of money behind it. We'll see how it all shakes out. But understand this: in Florida, 20 grams or more will get you a felony. 20 grams or less is a criminal misdemeanor, punishable up to a year in jail and $1,000 fine. All right. And for felony amounts, you can get up to 5 years in prison. And for those of you who say, oh, we're going to be okay, you probably have a privilege that you're not recognizing and identifying with. Folks want to see this. A majority of Floridians voted for legalization. Now, what 56%, but that's not the 60% needed to pass a constitutional amendment in Florida. And more than that, the opposition not only spent tax dollars to defeat it because Ron DeSantis allowed it to happen, but they ran focus groups to find the right talking points to get actual cannabis users and folks in the reform movement to fight against it. And there are even folks who are in the hemp sector who want to fight against it, because the fact is that the folks who have funded this, True Belief, also were funding legislation to essentially put mom and pop businesses out of it. So you have folks who support cannabis reform. You have folks who support legalization voting against it because of the folks who are funding the amendment and the legislative fights that they've had outside of this. So it's a shit show to get to 60%. And even then, once we do get to that 60%, it's essentially just the existing licensees, the vertically integrated cartel structures that are going to benefit and be able to do these adult use sales. So there's a lot more between here and there to get us to November 2026, to get us to the midterms. That's got to happen. There's obviously things that the Florida legislature can do to break up vertical integration. But here we are. These are the hot topics that you should know and what's going on in the Normal News. Visit normal.org and you can check out and read all of these stories. And that's the Normal News this week, fellas.
It's almost like when we were getting all of this like flack for, you know, when we put out our voter guide, when we were telling people to vote for Kamala.
Yeah.
It's you know, is it too early to say I told you so yet? Or
I mean, it was like day one, people saying "I told you so" when these executive orders came down, and it's we're a week, you know, 2 weeks into this administration, and this a week. It's only been a week. It's been 7 days.
It feels too early to say I told you so, but
it's not.
I
It's never
fucking
too
told
early.
you so, man.
Fucking told you so. It's like, and it's almost like, wow, we had a pro-pot pedophile as the original attorney general nominee, and now we have the lobbyist for the private prison group as the attorney general nominee. Like, what a bait and switch that Trump did on the American potheads.
And if I had to sanction a particular group in Florida who pushed Trump over the line in Florida, I have to say, unfortunately, Carlos, Chris, it was Hispanic folks, especially those of Cuban nationality in South Florida and even in Hillsborough County and Pinellas County. And yet that one of those executive orders, again, is to put down that Cuba is now officially a supporter of terrorism, and they are not going to allow sanctuary for those people trying to escape Cuba.
You know, Gary, at the risk of being alienated by the Democratic Party, you know, fuck it, I'm going to get alienated regardless. And if Nikki's got something to say to me,
you already are, Chris.
She can say it at the next normal board meeting. But the fact of the matter is that you see apologists within the Democratic Party who are essentially in South Florida, especially the Miami-Dade Democratic Party, taking the same line on Cuba that the Republicans have, and it's not winning elections. And then you see the Republicans and the Republican Cubans, like our Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, who worked in 2014 to pass in-state tuition for Dreamers and undocumented students. Is something that's near and dear to my heart, because when I was at the University of South Florida, not only was I working full-time as an immigration organizer and getting my master's degree, I was also in the student senate pushing the same bill to essentially allow for in-state tuition for folks who graduate from Florida high schools who, you know, are undocumented. It don't make no sense that you graduate from a Florida high school and you're paying out-of-state tuition because of your parents' political status. Like, to me, that just didn't make any sense. And now the same woman who sponsored that bill is up for leadership, and she's sitting here backtracking on the very bills that she sponsored. And to me, it's like, how fucking stereotypical Miami Cuban of you to sell out your own people to try and move up in the ladder of white supremacy in this state. And if you don't like what I'm saying, stick it yourself. I got the freedom of speech to do it. But the fact is she's willing to sell out her own people. And Carlos, help me out with this, brother. I mean, you're Miami Cuban. I'm a Tampa Cuban. We're a little bit more like
he doesn't have salami in his Cuban sandwich.
I can't help you, man. I think you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, you know, Cubans don't like themselves very much, I don't think. And we want to be white gringos for some reason.
I mean,
so,
it is.
Well, all the good folks who are Hispanic who said when they're talking about Hispanics and people of Hispanic ancestry not going to be a part of the big purge, so to speak.
Well, let's
sorry,
talk about
you're wrong.
That, Gary. You know, yeah, like there has been a veteran who's Puerto Rican. So this man's not only a U.S. citizen, he's also defended his country, who was rounded up in the ICE raids recently. There have been Native Americans who have been mistaken for undocumented immigrants in these ICE raids. I mean, we have to, you know, people always say, stay in your lane and talk about pot. But at its core, NORML has always been a civil rights organization. And right now, civil rights in this country are under attack by the current administration, by its policies, by its appointees, by the agencies, and by the same people who take oaths to defend the Constitution. And here we are. What are we supposed to do? Be silent about it? Just be happy potheads and keep reporting on what? On bullshit stories? You know, that's not what we're going to do. You know, Malcolm gave us a compliment that we're one of the better podcasts in the cannabis sector, you know, and it's like, that's the scary part about it, you know? That's the scary part. Because to me, I look at us as just three friends who are just shooting shit and fucking off. But if that's what scared me in high school when he used to say, oh, Chris, you're one of the smartest guys in the county. And I'm like, that's fucking scary, you know, because there's no one coming to save us. All real Americans know we're going to have to save ourselves. And it's scary to think is that the vast majority of the populace isn't adept enough to know when they're being lied to. They're not adept enough to see past the bullshit. The critical thinking skills of entire generations have been devastated by the black mirrors that are in front of our faces each and every day, and the catered content and algorithms that do it. So I would say this: if you don't like what we're saying, if it touches a nerve, then there are two things. Either one, you need to educate yourself and dig a little bit deeper and work on your critical thinking. Or two, you're an apologist for all the shenanigans going on, and in your heart you really agree with it. And if that's the case, then you got to do some soul searching either way. But don't sit up there and be mad at us for bringing you the truth and bringing you the best we can in cannabis news and entertainment each and every week.
Now, I have to say, if you're doing your own research and you're going to OAN and Epic Times, you're not doing your own research. You're just believing somebody else's shit that they're throwing at you. Okay, and then that's all there is to it.
You know,
I don't trust the party system anymore because so much of it doesn't work. But we have to work with them when we're doing politics in Tallahassee. But the bottom line is, I think it's going to take individual activism to get things straightened up, and that means you have to join folks, regardless of whatever political party they're in, to fix things and not spend more time towing up the party line and just going with your gut and knowing what's right and what is wrong. Like, for instance, these ICE raids, they're against the Fourth Amendment. You can't do illegal search and seizure without a permit, without. I mean, that raid in that restaurant you were talking about, they didn't even have a warrant.
Well,
there's
that's
nobody
the thing
there
too.
who was under warrant to get arrested.
ICE can get these administrative warrants, but to really arrest somebody, as long as if ICE were to come to your house per se, you don't have to open the door unless they have a judicial warrant. And then even then, if they have a warrant signed by a judge, any law enforcement agency can kick in your door. So tell them to kick it in. They're not going to kick it in if they don't have a judicial warrant because they know what that's going to do. So look, the fact is that educate yourself, protect yourself. There are groups out there that have resources. You can check out Voto Latino. You can check out the American Civil Liberties Union. Hell, you can even check out any of the labor movement, whether that's AFL-CIO, any of the other unions have resources for folks out there who are concerned about what's happening in this country. But I do want to say, folks who want to be Nazi apologists, first, they came for the trans folks in Germany. Then they came for the folks on the left in the labor movement. And before you know it, they were rounding up everyday folks who are hardworking, tax-paying members of that country. When people look around and they say, oh, what would you have done during the civil rights movement? What would you have done during World War II? For a lot of millennials, we grew up in 7th grade reading the Diary of Anne Frank and thinking, what would I have done? Well, this is your moment to realize right now, whatever you're doing right now is what you would have done during those times. So ask yourself, what are you doing right now to fight for justice, to fight back against injustice? Are you bootleaking and towing the line for political purposes? Are you identifying with all the shenanigans going on? Are you actually going to be part of something meaningful? Those folks that Malcolm has documented over the course of his career in the American Indian movement saw injustice happening to their people, that they organized and they said, no more police brutality against our people. No more of this, no more of these, marginalization of our communities. And this is an opportunity for you, even if you're not a member of a marginalized community, to stand up, to be an ally, to be a part of this, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a lot of amazing Jews that were part of the American Civil Rights Movement that stood with Dr. Martin Luther King, that stood.
Yeah, we funded a lot of Dr. King's movement through the temple in Atlanta, which was a huge synagogue. Had a lot of the wealthier folks come in there, and a lot of that got funneled through his church and went forward with that. So we have to take an eye on history if history hasn't been removed from our classrooms. I mean, right. I got a new primary care physician who was from Hungary, and I mentioned the fact that my family was from Romania, my wife's family was from Austria, so we had you on both sides. She said, "Wow, you know where Hungary is." I'm surprised. I said, well, in this country, not only do we not know where the countries are in Europe, they definitely don't know where the countries are in Asia or Africa. But in this case, if you ask somebody where the Lakota Nation is in this country, they'll have no idea where to point.
I mean, hell, they don't even know what the Gulf of Mexico is anymore. So look, here we are. All in all, I would say this much. If this is something you want to continue to get the real truth, the real news, we talk about alternative media, how podcasts have influenced folks. Each and every week, we're going to continue to do that. So you can become a member of Suncoast Normal, get involved. Hey, if you disagree with what we have to say, that's cool. We're a member-led organization. Join the organization, be a part of it, become a voting member, influence the direction of the org. But the fact is that we're a civil rights organization at our core. Our main thing has always been to stop arresting people for smoking pot. That is a civil right that should not be denied. And clearly we've seen it has medicinal value. Clearly, we've seen that all use is medicinal because, whether you go jump through the hoops for a doctor's recommendation, or you can just walk into a dispensary, show your ID, and get what you need to go feel better at the end of the day. This is something that folks should not be arrested for, sanctioned for, fired from their jobs for, had their kids taken away from them. And we have legislation right now to address all those other issues around the civil rights of cannabis users in the state of Florida. And we're going to continue to fight for those things nationwide. And, the work is not done. Half of this country might have legalization, but what as we've seen is that the wrong administrations at the federal level can still raid legal states, can still turn the power of the DEA and the FBI against folks in this movement. We've seen the rise of crony capitalism and cannabis cartels of oligarchs throughout the country. Hell, you got Russian oligarchs that are lead investors in some of the major multi-state operators in this country. So, all in all, if you're just a regular red-blooded American who, wants to enjoy and smoke their pot, and you want to get involved in the grassroots movement, NORML still has a place for you. NORML roots began out of the 60s. Keith Stropp, who today our founder still sits on the national board, was one of those young attorneys in the 60s and early 70s who saw something wrong with this, who came out of that era of being a young person in the civil rights movement. Someone like Gary, saw this stuff happening when he was younger and is still involved to this day. Carlos and myself, we're just a couple of guys who don't think it's right that people should get arrested for pot. Hell, I didn't think it was right that I got arrested for taking a pot home to my terminally ill dad who needed it to try and combat dementia, and I got arrested for it, and that pushed me into this movement. Carlos didn't think as a college student he should have got arrested for it. These are all things that stories that people have every single day, and there's a reason why our organization still exists. There's a reason why we're going to continue to bring you the truth in the news. There's a reason why we want to accomplish the mission, and the mission is not accomplished yet. So we need you to get involved, and that's why I'm asking folks out there, whether you agree with us or not, help us accomplish the mission. Become a member today, like and subscribe, share this content, and of course we'll continue to bring you amazing guests each and every week, like Macolm Mackinnon, Dan Skye, former editor of High Times, and an amazing photographer and journalist. And that's all I got.
When you talk to us, by the way, we actually listen, because we are an organization that is inclusive, which means we do believe in DEI. But it also means that if you're talking to us and you have a different point of view, I want to hear your point of view. If we feel it's wrong, we'll say it's wrong. But a lot of people have ideas that we don't have, and yours would add to what our body of knowledge. Now, Zuckerberg's going to hate me for this, but I need to fact check two of the comments we made. Someone mentioned that illegal immigrant is not a political status. Illegal immigrant itself is not even a phrase. It's undocumented immigrant. They may have passed across the border illegally, but once they're here on this soil, they are undocumented immigrants at this point in time.
Well, Gary, I got to borrow a phrase from our friends in the Native American movement. No one is illegal on stolen land.
And illegal immigrants, again, he used the word, don't have constitutional protections. Untrue. Anybody in this country has constitutional protections. Nowhere in the Fourth Amendment does it say illegal search and seizure is okay if you didn't come across the border legally.
Hell, our permanent legal residents, folks with green cards, they get like a pamphlet when they get their green card, and it says like you don't have the right to vote, but every other constitutional right is afforded them. They can still own guns. They have the right to bear arms. It's just ironic that the average American is so uneducated in this country. I mean, the 100-some questions out of the 10 possible questions you could get on a U.S. citizenship exam, the vast majority of Americans can't pass it. They wouldn't be able to answer these things. So we have folks that are literally coming to this country that are more educated than us on it, and that's a failing of our school systems by design. And so when Gary says we're inclusive, that we care about your comments, he's right. Gary actually reads the social media comments. For my own mental health, sometimes I have to check out because I get too tuned up. So for those of you that I've cussed out on social media, don't take it personal. It's a matter of I take it personal because I see the hard work that Gary does and doesn't get paid to do. I see the hard work that Carlos does and the amount of money he spends out of his own pocket to give this organization a home within his own business. There are hardworking volunteers and folks who are donating and spending their hard-earned resources time, treasure, and talent to make this organization work. And when I see keyboard warriors who have not done a goddamn thing for this movement talking shit, it pisses me off. So for those of you who have caught the wrath of my ire on social media, again, no, it's because I'm defending these gentlemen and ladies on our board who do so many amazing things, and it's not a matter of wanting to personally attack anybody.
He just keeps on commenting. Malcolm, I remember you saying you were on Blue Skye. What's your name on Blue Skye?
Macolm Mackinnon.
Macolm Mackinnon. I'm CJ Hermita, so I'm joining the Blue Skye.
I will follow you. I will follow you. Follow anybody.
I'll make it a point to add another social media to my category. I never got the opportunity to get on TikTok because I didn't want to do it. It was too many social media. Now it's gone. So hey,
I know I have. I'm on. It can be a real pain. This is social media stuff.
Yeah, starting over is a pain in the ass. I'll tell you that. But like,
oh yeah, Carlos, I'm glad you mentioned that. For those of you who follow us on Instagram, Stone Cold Normal's Instagram has been taken down by Zuckerberg. And fact of the matter is that it's because we were promoting some of Carlos's mushroom content. So give a big finger to Zucks for taking down the normal. Instagram.
It wasn't even that. It wasn't even that. It was that I was logged into my mushroom company and Suncoast Normal on the same phone. On the same phone.
That's I talked to my synagogue. We are going to de-Jew him. He is officially going to be shunned from the Jewish community.
I didn't know y'all did excommunications, Gary.
We're working on that with Netanyahu right now too, but we're letting the International Criminal Court get him first.
Hey, look, team. Again, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you for everyone for being here. Carlos, say your piece so we can wrap up for the weekend.
No, it's just you look at the analytics for the show and like nobody's watching on any type of meta, and it just goes to show that, like, I mean, free speech my ass, man. We've been shadow banned for a long time. Yeah. They've taken the cannabis message and they've taken it off of Facebook and they've taken it off of Instagram. Mm-hmm. And we did a good job at one point promoting this message on Facebook. Like we got a huge following on our Facebook at one point. So I don't know what the fuck. We should be able to live stream the show on Blue Skye or some shit.
Yeah. So
anyways, bye everybody.
We'll catch y'all next week in the rotation.
Thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.